Welcome everyone to a creepy story Reddit video. I gathered these off of obviously Reddit, and thank you to Made Mad, Whitmonk, XRA Mona, and I'm Miss Brightside for these stories. I didn't ask them for them, but I am going to credit them. So, yeah, go read these stories if you want to leave the links down in the description. I'm going to make this as Christmassy as possible. There's going to be snow going down the images. I tried to find the best images I can. I know for the rest stop story, there's a gas station. I know, but I can't find a rest stop in the snow. So, I hope you like the crackling fireplace. I hope you like the video. And there will be another Christmassy video coming out on Christmas Eve. It's going to have to do with you know what? I'm not even gonna tell you. It's gonna be a game. I'm gonna have a couple of people in it, and it's gonna be fun. I hope you guys enjoy this. I wanted to do this Santa sightings thing like I did a couple of years ago that got like 16,000 views, but I'm like, that's boring. Let's do some creepy, scary stories from Reddit that are allegedly true. I don't know if they are. They could be, but they sound pretty creepy nonetheless. So, anyways, enjoy. I was driving the annual 5-hour drive to my cousin's house where my extended family meets every Christmas. I had just gotten out of class that evening, so I was just about 3 hours in around 1 to 2 a.m. ish. I stopped by a rest stop because I really needed to go to the restroom. I've been to the rest stop many times before ever since I was young, since it's always been between my house and my cousin's. It's a little vacant, but usually around Christmas there's a couple of families there in a day, then a few lone truckers or drivers in the night. Let me first describe the layout of the rest stop. It's somewhat forested by the road. It's almost laid out like a camping outpost. There's a square in the middle with some bulletin boards and vending machines. The front half of the square, next to the parking lot, has a set of bathrooms, and the back half has another set. I parked and noticed this time it was completely empty. It was late at night, but even the road was quieting down. There were no cars, just really felt eerie. I walked from my car and got to the middle of the first half of the square, what I can see straight across, which was maybe 30 to 40 feet away. There, I realized there was somebody, really tall, like 7 feet tall, just standing out of the light of the lamppost all the way across the area. He was just standing there, motionless. I don't know what else he could have been doing. I freeze and think about it. There was no way that I could possibly do anything against someone 3 times my size. I was even more terrified on what would happen if I went in the girls' restroom and I walked out to see him right there at the door. So I turned around and started back to my car. He started walking the same direction, keeping the same horizontal pace with me while moving a little diagonally, slowly closing the distance. When he gets almost halfway to me, I run to my car, too scared to even look behind me. I hear him running across the grass. I get in my car and back up as fast as I can. I could see him maybe 15 from the front of my car, and getting extremely close, I peeled to the left, speeding back onto the highway, not looking back. It was the last part that really keeps me shaken up after that. Before, I was able to think that maybe he was just a janitor or a random person who was just happened to be going in my direction. But from then on, I knew for sure he was coming for me. And why was he just there? I saw no other cars or anything. I'll never forget that moment where I just froze like a deer in the headlights, seeing him just standing still across that rest area. I'm only going into those in the day from now on. So I was at my local Walmart the day before Christmas, shopping with my grandparents for stocking stuffers and the like. Getting bored. I wanted to go look around the store, and they let me, as long as I looked for a clown-designed bag for my great-grandma's gift. My family was sick, and I prefer my grandparents anyways, so that had worked out well. I went around, first to the books, and finding nothing interesting, moved on. I decided to search more actively for the bag. I found balloons and decided it was more birthday-like than clownish. I bumped into a guy and turned to apologize. I guess maybe alarm bells rang, even though he didn't look suspicious. Maybe instincts, I guess? I apologized and quickly kept looking. I thought, I really did, that he had moved to a woman with a baby in her cart. I breathed out in relief, figuring it was his family, which put me at ease. Then I noticed the same man in the aisle next to me, just walking around but not really looking. I don't know how to phrase that, but feeling still slightly uneasy. I went with my gut and moved to search somewhere else. I checked maybe 2 aisles before he showed up again. A presence next to me made me look, and just as I did, his hand was at my side. I've had some worse experiences with others, so this was actually tame compared to most. He tickled my side and leaned in close. Again, with my instincts, I stepped back a few times, but he moved with me. His words freaked me out the most. "You're such a cutie," he gushed, taking back his hand with a creepy grin appearing. My features twisted in disgust, I'm sure. My stomach flipped and bounced. I now really wish I had thrown up all over him, but whatever. "Do you have a boyfriend?" I couldn't formulate a reply, my mouth like cotton, tongue too heavy suddenly. I think I made an indignant noise. I'm not sure if he's into older girls or what. I just turned 15 and it seems like I've filled out well everywhere except my height, so I stand about 5 feet or so. I can't imagine him thinking I was a kid running around because, again, I filled out well. So maybe he's just into teenagers. It seriously freaked me out. But I was stuck there as he waited for a response. The response should have been a knee to the crotch, but I have horrible anxiety as it is. That's why when I consider making a scene, I couldn't stand to alert the only other 2 people in the aisle who were unaware of the situation. I'd say he was around 30 or so, unattractive and kind of scraggly. My heart was pounding, but my grandparents showed up. My grandfather is quite tall, in a horribly intimidating sort of way. So with a glare, the creepy smile was wiped away and he bolted out of there. My pulse hadn't calmed down whatsoever. I'm not sure how I must have seemed, but inside I was pretty shaken up. They walked me to the next aisle, and to avoid a confrontation, I went outside with my grandpa to tap in while my grandpa paid. And I never really saw him again after that. This happened almost 3 years ago, on Christmas Eve. At the time, I was working at a retail job at the mall. I live in a reasonably sized city, and we have a great transit system. I had tried to get out of working the holidays, but, of course, that didn't happen. My parents were out of state visiting the rest of my family, and I had planned to take the Amtrak out there to visit them early in the morning. I got off work around 9 p.m. and caught my first bus at the transit station below the mall. I had my headphones in and was minding my own business when a group of 3 guys in maybe their mid-20s got on the bus and sat behind me. I had my music playing pretty quietly and I heard them start talking about me. I've always been afraid of strangers, so I tried to play it off and tell myself I was just being paranoid, but I knew better. My first transfer was coming up, and I waited until the very last second to request my stop. The bus started slowing down, and as I stood up, I heard the 3 of them do the same. At this point, I was getting a little nervous. It was nearly 10 p.m., and although there were plenty of businesses in the area, no one was around, seeing as it was Christmas Eve and all of them are closed. I had to walk from the bus stop I had gotten off of to a different one down the street to catch the bus that would take me to my apartment. There was a little shortcut that I've never seen anyone take before, so I got off the bus and started heading that way. These guys follow me. I reach into my pocket and hold my mace in my hand, something that most young women I know always have on them when taking public transit, especially at night, and reach the next bus stop. I sat down in the shelter and pretended I didn't notice that I wasn't alone. One of the guys enters the shelter and starts talking to me. "Hey baby, how you doing? What's your name? Why are you all by yourself so late at night? It's Christmas." I ignored him, stood up, and walked about 20 feet away from the bus stop. This is where shit got real weird. One of the other guys started walking toward me. I moved close to the street to let him pass me. He kept walking for maybe another 10 feet, then stopped and turned around. The other 2 were still standing next to the shelter. As I'm looking at them, they start walking toward me really fast. I turn around, and the 3rd guy who had passed me was doing the same. I panicked and ran across the street as fast as I could, losing my favorite hat doing so, unfortunately, and saw that there was a fast food restaurant still open down the road. I looked behind me and saw that these guys were chasing me. I booked it to the fast food joint and ran inside. I told the guy at the counter what had just happened. He was a terrifying looking dude, maybe 6'4", in his early 30s, and covered in muscle. The guys had waited outside for a moment, but I'm pretty sure they bolted when they saw me talking to him. The employee took off out the door in search of them, but couldn't find him. I waited there for almost an hour to make sure they wouldn't come back. I was too afraid to go wait for the next bus, so I ended up spending my train money for the next morning on a cab to get home, and spent the Christmas in bed watching. Last Christmas, I kicked it up a notch by lining my driveway with several long strings of colorfully obnoxious Christmas lights. Yes, I'm that neighbor, and my driveway resembled a landing strip. On many late-night arrivals, I was particularly thankful for that bright and happy landing strip. I lived in an older established neighborhood in Baton Rouge that felt like it was carved out of a forest. Most of my neighbors were older and retired, with a few young families sprinkled in. One night, I was very surprised and annoyed to find my landing strip was gone. This seemed odd and very out of character for my quiet neighborhood, but I quickly blew it off after several days of fantasizing of some great revenge against the Scrooge-like hooligans that must have wandered over from a distant neighborhood. Late one night, just after Christmas, there was a knock at my front door. This was odd since I didn't get much front door traffic except on Halloween, and certainly not this late. I flipped on the front porch light and opened the door. Apparently, my porch light was out, so the only available light was spilling out from behind me from my living room. I quickly tapped the light a couple of times to see if I can get it to blink on, but nothing happened. Standing on my porch was an older man who stated, "I found your Christmas lights." Not knowing what to say, he added, "I was driving by one night and saw some kids taking your Christmas lights from your driveway and run down the street with them. They stomped on them pretty badly, but I thought you might be able to fix them, so I grabbed them and threw them in my car if you want them." At that point, he took a step or two towards his car in my driveway, as if to lead the way, and I felt compelled to show some appreciation for his thoughts and efforts, so I naturally and automatically began to fall in behind him while exchanging some small talk. You have to understand that the yards in my neighborhood were all close to 1 acre in size, so we all have a large front yard that are well back from the road and other houses. This is why most folks here have long driveways. Secondly, there are giant oaks and numerous other large trees everywhere, so the street lights are basically useless once you get off the streets into people's driveways. I can't really explain just how dark my front yard was that night, except to say that I could barely see the guy I was following to a car that I could not yet see. As we get closer to his car, I'm getting a really bad and odd feeling, and the questions in my head are trying to catch up to the pace of the events that are quickly occurring. He's returning my stolen, broken Christmas lights from a few weeks ago? About 3 feet from his car, he does something kind of odd. He stops and points at his car and says the lights are in the back seat. I had assumed that he would just open the door and hand me the lights. It seemed odd for me to open his car and dig around in the back seat to get my own lights. His car looked to be some kind of old Galaxy 500, an old man's car door. I felt like this whole dealio was just getting more and more spooky, but now I feel kind of stuck. So I stepped towards his car and opened the back door. At this point, things and thoughts seem to accelerate, and the man steps in closer right behind me, so now I'm basically pinned in between the open car door and the man. To my surprise and very great disappointment, no interior light comes on when I open the car door, so I remain in almost pitch-black darkness with this strange man behind me, and a dark hole where I expect his rear seat to be. It's so dark that I quickly wonder if someone is sitting in the rear seats and about to pull me in while the older man slams the door shut behind me. By now, all of my survival senses are screaming and flashing, so I just blindly squat and reach into the floorboard of the car to feel around for these lights. My hands feel wire, so I immediately grab it and quickly spin around past the man while quickly yanking and dragging these wires out of his car. I thank him profusely as I quickly stumble toward my front door. I yelled one final thank you, yanked the remaining tail off the lights, and closed the door. The lights were an absolute mess and clearly had been cut in several places. I don't think there was even one salvageable bulb on the entire mutilated string. This was more than a stomping, and I wondered why he thought that I might possibly be interested in this mess or even remotely trying to fix it. I just felt very relieved to be back inside and thought the whole thing was bizarre. but shrugged it off and went back to bed finally. That next morning, while recalling the night's bizarre events, I remembered that I needed to change my front porch light. When I went to change the bulb, I discovered that the light worked fine. It had just become loose somehow.